The
illustrious Jabba bids you welcome. I'm going to regret this.
I'm Pete Mitchell. He's Peyton Jones. And this is the Church Planter Podcast, brought to you by Church Planter Magazine. Hey, Church Planter, this is Pete Mitchell.
And this is Peyton Jones.
And did someone come in your office the second we started? Because all of a sudden I see you go. Do a quick little
So it's funny you say that. I could have sworn I saw a person there.
Okay, let's not go into another exorcism episode. I don't think my heart can take it.
I'm not. I just saw a person and they weren't there. So it might have something to do with the amount of coffee I drank.
Do you drink a lot of coffee?
Today, actually.
Yeah.
But, you'll get this. I thought of you this morning when I was in the shower. And no, it's not like that. My wife came in the bathroom.
Hey, it's better than when you're on the crown.
Are you sure about that?
It's called a throne, not a crown. Never mind.
I frequently call you from there. And I knew what you meant. Because I remember the first time I called you, I said, hey, are we friends?
Was that the first? That wasn't the first time.
The first time I called you from that location, I should specify.
I remember
friends, right?
You used to always call me and I'd be going through the drive-thru at Taco Bell and I'd be like, hold on. I'd be laughing because I'm ordering something from Taco Bell every time.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, man. So, where was I going? Oh yeah, no, so in the shower this morning, remember how you and I had this talk years ago about coffee in a shower? It's hard to tell which one wakes you up more.
For you, maybe. For me, it's the clear shower. I'm not a coffee person.
So this is what I'm doing. I'm 48 years old. I get up in the morning. I get up at 5. I get up at 5:30 sometimes. And I cannot for an hour get going. I hunch over the counter. I've got my coffee there. I'm making my coffee. I'm boiling the kettle. I'm doing the French press thing. And sometimes I'm so tired, I don't reach over to the French press and pour the coffee in the cup because I hurt so much. Being old is no joke, dude. I just have this.
I'm trying to understand this. Say this again. What is hurting?
Everything. But of course, I have a spinal condition as well, right? So that might be part of it. But I
would have to say it is because you're not that much older than me.
You don't have that?
Dude.
It started this year.
This kind of perfection.
Keep in mind, I got COVID.
This kind of perfection. You didn't get COVID.
Oh, I totally got COVID.
Did you get tested, or are you just saying
I didn't have the test at that time?
See, you didn't have COVID.
Stop this.
I
was sick as a dog in 5. I guess
maybe you were just sick. Maybe you were just sick.
5 weeks. You remember how sick I was, though?
No, you were probably taking 5 weeks off.
I pretty much was. And I remember I went to the doctor and I described everything, like the broken glass in the chest, and just sleeping all the time, and
get the antibody test, and then I'll believe you had it.
You know what? I might do that. I'm convinced because I got stranded in Portland Airport back when the whole thing was breaking out.
I'm convinced that I'm immune to it because Jamie and I know so many people who've had it, and we're we've been hanging out with them, and they all get it. So we're either Typhoid Mary over here, or we're just immune.
So there was an episode of Friends where Phoebe, she was trying to get the chicken pox really bad.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what you remind me of. But no, I mean, here's the thing. I told Andrew this morning, when I'm boiling that kettle, starting tomorrow morning, I'm getting in that shower because it's not until the water gets over me that I'm actually feeling like I'm the Tin Man, dude. Oil. Remember that in Wizard of Oz?
See, you can't do that. When you got your microphone set the way you do, when you do those weird voices, it cuts you out. And I can't hear it, neither can anyone else.
Okay, remember when the Tin Man needs oil and he's all frozen up and he's like, I need oil. Could you hear that?
Better.
Really?
What can you change the setting? Like, are they doing work in the background?
Dude, my microphone's a mystery. I have no idea. Oh, yeah, dude. Like yesterday, I'm doing this call and he's underneath me putting screws in the drywall in the garage ceiling. That was fun. So
nice.
But anyways, so on to, but I need to do that starting tomorrow because what I'm doing is not working. But keep in mind, like I said, I have a neuromuscular condition that I was born with, and I had a spinal condition I was born with. So I always have a sense of like dull pain in my entire body.
And you're ugly. So, that's a trifecta.
Totally ugly. It's weird because I never go to the doctor. So when I go to the doctor, they're always like, because I got an MRI and they're like, oh, the guy's like, you have congenital spinal stenosis, right? And I go, what's that? He goes, where your spinal column's too small, your spinal cord. I said, what do you mean? He goes, your spinal.
Did you say, look at me, I'm a hobbit. How can I have a spinal cord too small?
So he goes, yeah. He goes, do you have pain all the time? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I've had it for years. I know my wife, I thought everybody has it. She says, no, not everybody has it. Because when we were dating, I'm like, like you have that pain. It's like that numb, almost like vibrating, and it hurts a little bit, but it's kind of always there. And she goes, no.
I know.
I go, you don't have that? I thought that was normal. Like everybody has that, right? And she's like, no. So as I've gotten older, it's gotten worse. So like it's chronic pain is what it is, which I don't take medicine for anything, So it makes me sleepy at night, man. Like that's the thing. Makes me really, really tired in the night. So like the older I get, I'm now like my mom used to fall asleep on the sofa all the time. I'm that dude. Second I sit down, a couple minutes later, doesn't matter. We could be watching Mad Max Fury Road, which I do not want to fall asleep in during that movie, and I'll fall asleep.
Interesting.
Yeah. But what about you, man? What's up? Because you've been doing the working out.
What
you've been doing?
I have not been working.
You've been doing the hip hop abs with Shanti,
dude. I had surgery. It wasn't that long ago.
Oh, that's right. Yes, round 2. Tell me.
So I'm debating if I should just tell everyone what the surgery was. No, my name is not Patrice. It was not that surgery.
You would make one ugly woman. I'm just saying.
Well, I make an ugly man, so an ugly woman ain't that far of a stretch. But no, so I saw the doctor yesterday, and he gave me permission to start working out again. And I'm like, yes.
Nice.
And he's like, well, you might want to start off slow. And I'm like, 400 on bench, not 450. Just kidding. But no, I was like, wow, dude, this is cool. So Monday I can start working out again. Because I figured, I'm on a roll of not. What was?
Okay, that time there was a person, and it scared the crap out of me. Hello, do you guys want to meet Ricky, my worker? I'm on a podcast. What's up? Oh yeah, just a little bit.
When you drop it.
Yeah.
It's the wrong wire. I don't know where it's going.
Okay. All right. I'll be down.
Cross the red wire with the blue wire.
Yes.
I can jumpstart the house.
That scared me.
I heard something and then I saw you and I was like, I don't know what's going on either.
Well, you're vulnerable because I got these headphones in, right? And like, you're vulnerable. Like you can't hear. Like I should have been able to hear him going up the stairs. But also, I'm in rapt attention, GP.
You're in what?
Rapt attention.
Oh, to me? To what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No, I'm just excited. I get to work out. So I'm going to wait until Monday and start working out on Monday.
Nice.
But it's been stinking cold. I'm like, I don't know. I want to go out in my backyard and start working out.
Yeah, man.
But
I know it has been freakishly cold. I love it. I'm in my element. I'm so happy. The colder it gets, the better for me.
So yesterday, those who listen to the podcast know that we got a puppy. She's coming up on 5 months, I think. See, September 4th, October, November, December, January. Yeah, she's coming up on 5 months next week. Really small. I think she's going to be smaller than my last dog, Ricky. And I'm kind of bummed about that because Ricky was like Ricky was a really small pit bull. And I was like, now this pit bull is going to be smaller than Ricky?
Yeah.
What the heck? I think she's mixed with a dachshund because she's like getting
really?
longer. She's getting longer, not taller.
You have a weenie pit.
Dude, how awesome would that be?
You got a weenie pit. That's so rad.
So I'm like, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if she like goes through a growth spurt because right now she's really small for an almost 5-month-old.
Right.
Like I'm a little bit. Jamie's excited about it. And I'm kind of bummed. But anyway, so last night we're eating dinner, and we keep her like in the movie room or here in my office, and she can usually go back and forth between the two rooms. And I hear
like
her
a little doggy gate, or
we just leave those French doors behind me open. We got a gate in between that big opening on the other side. So I hear she's chewing on something, and I'm like, okay, that doesn't sound like her bone. And she's been eating the remote control for R2D2 lately. So I go look, and she's actually demolished a pair of my readers, my glasses that I kept. No. I kept one in our movie room because, I'm like reading on my iPad while they're watching some stupid show or whatever. And so I'm like ticked, right? But I strategically place readers everywhere, so I never have to worry about where are my readers because there's always going to be one there, right? So I got one on this desk. I got one on that desk. I got one in the movie room. I got one in my car. Like I just leave a pair everywhere. So then like 3 minutes later, I hear her chewing on something else. And so I go look because, again, it doesn't sound like her bone. She jumped up on my desk and started chewing my other pair of readers.
Oh, no, dude. And she got the glass too.
I'm like, that's it. That's it. This little dachshund is going to get it.
Don't you call them dachshunds? Isn't that like
I want to say the word dachshund.
Dachshund.
That's awesome. Man.
Hey, I just had some people from Germany join New Breed. I think I mentioned.
You mentioned.
Who, but they have officially been.
By the way, Tyrone Peterson says ugly is a medical condition.
It could be. It could be.
Oh, man.
Is he talking about me or you, though?
Well, I would think it was our conversation where I said the three conditions you had, your neuromuscular, your spine, and your ugly.
Yeah. Well, that's like Roseanne and Anna Dana on Saturday Night Live, where she reads the mail, and this guy's like, and I got bunions on my feet, and I got this, and he's like, and the way she reads it, and then she stops after he gives all these ailments. He's writing in for, it's Dear Roseanne and Anna Dana. It's like like Dear Abby or whatever. She stops and goes, "You sound like a real fun guy." Which is her way of saying, "Suck it up, Buttercup." Just bag and rubbing it in.
I like that little suck it up, Buttercup action,
dude. I sometimes say that to my daughter. Is that wrong? I tell her, you guys, but I say it in an encouraging way because she's got a lot of things she's got to overcome, and right now she's wearing leg braces. Sometimes I'll say to her. So I was spelling out to her this week. I'm like, hey, and this for those of you that are like, oh my gosh. This is just par for the course in the Jones house. This is what we do. All right. The tears and putting leg braces on. And sometimes I'll say to her, I'll be like, babe, do this for 1 or 2 years. You're not going to need these anymore. That's what the doctors are hoping. And then I'll be like,
have her watch Forrest Gump.
But then I say, you've got to suck it up. Okay. You got to suck it up. And part of me hears in the background, you are the devil. You're going to hell. You can't tell your 7-year-old daughter. I don't say it mean like suck it up, but I tell her, you guys suck it up, babe,
Okay. You made me think of a story that I got to tell you about my daughter. So Fridays, I got to go pick up my kids from school. It's literally behind our house, not a big deal. So I walk over there. My son's 9, my daughter's 6. And I'm taking our puppy for a walk. Now, our puppy just loses her mind around the kids. She is just goes to a level 10 instantly because she wants to, play.
Right.
So we're walking back, and I guess one kid was on one side of me, the other kid's on the other side. And all of a sudden, like, my dog is just like, she'll be jumping the whole way. Like, she's not walking, she's jumping the whole way back and forth. And she just like fully not looking, jumps and just tags my daughter and knocks her knees right out from underneath her and she just falls flat, just like a hard whap.
Wow.
And I'm like looking at her and I go, "Are you okay?" And she looks at me all stunned and she's like, "Yeah." And she gets up and I look at my son. I go, "The difference between you and her, you'd be crying and your sister just sucks it up." And it's true. My son would have been crying, but my daughter,
I
man,
can totally see that in their personality. Yeah, your daughter, she's the baller. She's the one that you're gonna have to watch out for one day.
oh, dude,
She's gonna inherit all of Pete's. So I used to call Pete, and I'd be like, "Hey, man, what do you want to do today?" And he's like, "Same thing we do every day," which is a pinky in the brain, right? You know, try to take over the world. She's gonna have that in her.
Totally.
Pete. Yeah, she's got that. She's gonna inherit all of like Emperor Palpatine's power going into Rey. That's what's happening.
My daughter is she's got my personalities. Evil. Like she is she's an introvert, definitely, just like me. An extrovert around her friends, just like me. I think she's going to be the shooter between the two of them. My son has like taken on a lot of the personality of his grandfather that he never met, but he is very much like Jamie's father, like very much like him.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see how different, personalities are at such a young age.
Big time, dude.
Like just the way they were hatched. Different.
So true, isn't it? So true.
So hey, good news, man. I got to share this with you real quick. Yesterday, Jamie and I had a serious conversation about moving out of California.
Really?
What?
Wait. So I can't get you to move to Carlsbad, but you're going to move out of state.
By the way, if I have to live in California, I'm not leaving Orange County. I'm not moving to Carlsbad. Really? Yeah.
San Diego's rad, dude.
No, it is.
You're the best.
It's beautiful, but I can't carry a gun as easily down there as I can up here.
Are you serious?
It's harder to get a concealed carry permit in San Diego. Are you
serious?
It's becoming looser because they're seeing how good Orange County is doing. Orange County is basically a shall issue. But what San Diego did is you'd have to say, well, I'm a business owner and I hire and fire people and I have to go to the bank and blah, blah, blah. You'd have to give them all those excuses. And then they were issuing their permit saying, okay, you can carry, but only when you're doing official business duties. So you couldn't carry just going to the, dinner or whatever.
Really?
So they're starting to loosen that up. They're starting to change it, but I don't want to move to that kind of a county. Just like I would never move to LA County.
You had different county rules as well as state.
Well, how they give them out. Like you can't get a permit in LA County pretty much, but you can't get one in San Francisco, San Mateo, basically.
How is this connected to the right to bear arms? Like how is that not contested?
Oh, it is being contested, but it's so smooth and slow through the courts that it's like probably another 10 years from hitting the Supreme Court.
Oh, wow. Our system is pretty gunked up. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. So Jamie was like, because
I'm reading John Adams right now about the founding fathers, that big giant 24-hour-long audiobook. So I'm listening to it, which, by the way, I was telling you, that's what I want to be my dream job is
read books.
Where I can say 3 words and just sit back and collect my millions. This is Audible. That's what I want, my job. But I have a feeling like the voice of Siri, he's not getting paid for every one of those. He walked into the studio.
You know what it was? He was a guy on Fiverr. They gave him $5 on Fiverr, and they're using that for everything.
Wouldn't that be rad?
That would be the best.
Oh gosh, yeah. They paid him a one-time fee, and
I'm the voice of Audible. I got $5 for it, and Fiverr took their cut.
But how cool is it? Like the lady that recorded Siri, she didn't know she was the voice of Siri until she heard herself on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she had no idea. Because I guess people do those for like all kinds of. It could have gone to any company.
Sure.
Apple just like your voice and bought it.
Nice.
So, sorry.
No, so we were talking. We were talking about Tennessee. We were talking about Texas, and part of the reason why Jamie's like open to it now is my son is extremely social. Like you know him. He's like I said, the opposite of me. He's a total extrovert. And he's only 9 years old. And she can see part of his issues is he's suffering from depression. And she's like, what 9-year-old has depression? This is ridiculous. These lockdowns, this.
Oh, but they opened them up this week.
Yes,
now that Biden is in office.
Here it is. I'm going to take away all of your freedoms, and then I'm going to give you a little bit back and go, hey, aren't I so good? Look at how I helped you out. I'm like, it's in the 40s. And they say, now we can do outdoor dining? Yeah. Seriously? You didn't do anything for us. No. We've been going to this underground restaurant that's not underground. They just opened. And they're like, we've been eating inside. We're like, forget this. For weeks now.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Apparently that city, and I'm not gonna say what city it is, but that city's police does not care, because I've heard several other restaurants in that city have been open.
Well, so Encinitas, they're just defying their city's fines, because they're like, look, we got to stay open. We're social distance. We're following all the guidelines. It's outdoor seating, but you can fine us all you want. We're just not paying it.
Right.
And so the whole city has banded together in San Diego County to say, yeah, whatever, fine us,
Steve Erickson said they just gave us the opportunity to dine outside last month here in Minnesota. Oh my gosh.
Steve, you guys have the best restaurants. I adopted my second daughter from St. Paul's. Oh my gosh. The food places there. What's the is it Dunst Brothers? There's a coffee shop there that was amazing back then. This is in 2013. I've heard that they got bought out or they're not as good, but dude, I remember just going to food places and being like, this place is rad. And they're like, well, it gets pretty cold here. In the winter, all we can do is eat. So we're pretty good at making good food here.
I like that thinking.
Because it's crazy cold there. So, but the other thing is, I was thinking about my other job, Pete, that I might like, other than doing this full time, right? Wouldn't that be great? You and me working together all day, every day.
All we'd have to do is actually spend the time and go,
get sponsors.
How can we make money at this and not call it jump school? That would just be the conversation.
Pretty much. I actually believe that we could have probably monetized this thing very well had we wanted, but that's what people do. They do this, but I think part of our listenership also goes, hey, these guys aren't just doing this for money.
Yeah, they're not really, they're barely even in it for ministry is what they're thinking.
We're in it for two reasons. I it's funny, man, because going back to this, not to do an apologetic, but I do think that part of our podcast's appeal is that we're actually just real people talking about real things and talking about church planning too. And I think there's so much of a lack of authenticity in ministry often that people were drawn to that. I think we were just basically like, hey, we're not here to advance a career. We're not here to impress you. We're not here to get a following. We're here to help you as the planner. And that's got to be what it is. And also, Pete and I are just here to have a good time as well while we're doing it. I think that works. So, stupid people in Oceanside calling me. So anyways, my other job that I always am amazed that nobody's done is being Batman. And you don't need to have $1 million. You just need to have a little bit of Kevlar body armor. You need to have, and you can go on you can go online.
Hey, guess who ordered some body armor?
You did?
I did.
So here's the thing. You are my richest friend. You are getting extremely in shape, and you did just have a body enhancing surgery. So I am kind of looking at
I got the butt implants. They're coming along great.
Cybernetic bionic enhancements. And no, he didn't. I made that up. But
it's actually, it comes with a pump. You remember those tennis shoes where I can kind of pump up my butt cheeks as needed?
Dude, I remember a toy when we were a kid. They were like these inflatable muscles, and it was the Incredible Hulk. And so you would stick these under your T-shirt, and you'd pretend to get mad. And you had like a little hand pump, and on the commercial, you can look this thing up. He goes, oh no, he's getting mad. And he's over there and he's like, oh, and he's like pumping this thing up in his muscles and his shirt. And in the commercial, the kid, it's like the 70s, the kid has a rubber hose, a garden hose, and he goes, and he bends it like it's a bar. And then it shows him holding an ice cream cone. He goes, and crushes it, and ice cream goes everywhere. It was rad. And I wanted that thing so bad. I'd still, if for an adult, I would still have it. I'm just saying.
Except if they made them today, you wouldn't have to pump it. You'd be like an app on your phone. You could press a button and it would automatically fill. I'm just saying. That's how stupid technology is.
This is the other thing. You see these trophies that I got back here, right? If you're listening to the podcast, I have a Snake Eyes helmet. I have a Boba Fett helmet. And I have a replica of the Child behind me. And I swear to you, if I could find a bust of Chaka from the 70s.
Chaka scared the crap out of me. Always.
He was a little weird. Admittedly.
I thought Tyrone's comment on that thread was the best. He goes, his full name is Chaka Khan. And I was dying when I read that.
And I responded, he wasn't pathetic with Holly. He Chaka, because I feel for you, that Chaka Khan, let me rock it. It's all I want to do. Chaka Khan, let me rock it because I feel for you.
I don't know the song, but thank you for giving us that.
That I did. Only a few would know Chaka Khan. So that was the first of white people's foray into rap back in the day. So, anyways, what I was going to say was going back to Chaka, though. Chaka was a deal. And also, do you remember the Slee Stacks?
Yeah, what's that from?
Land of the Lost.
Dude. Oh, it was the same. Okay.
Yeah.
I remember the name. Yeah.
And they come in. Well, Brandon Brooks sent me all of these like 1970s like Halloween costumes. And I was like, dude, why is there not a Chaka costume? So that's how this got me thinking about Chaka. And then I was like, dude, Chaka was like the bomb when I was a kid. Like I was so into that. And if Chaka was in the episode, I was going to like it. But also,
dude, our listeners, you should see the stuff that they're putting up on our Facebook feed. Like Steve just shared the Chaka Khan music video from YouTube.
Yes. And then the guy that would be like, yes, Will Marshall, the good Slee Stack, the smart one. And I'm blanking out on his name right now. But I told Brandon Brooks, I go, remember when this Slee Stack was on screen? I'm like, always felt safe. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, funny enough, that's my buddy's dad, because Brandon's in Hollywood. And so he's like, yeah, I met that dude. And I'm like, is he still alive? Because I know Brandon will hook me up. And Brandon's like, no, he passed away about 4 years ago. But that dude, man, he was like this wise, good Slee Stack that was going to help him get home. Oh my gosh, dude. So good. So good. Memories, Pete. I'm getting a little gushy here. But
we should actually get into
Batman. Why can't I be Batman, Pete? Why can't, if I have
short.
that stuff?
You're too short.
Okay. But if
did you see that article? Did you see that article where they're like, oh man, Michael Keaton should be the next Batman? Did you see that one?
No.
They're like, the current Michael Keaton should play the next Batman. I was like, that would be great. Keaton. Like how old he is now. Yeah,
But dude, you've read the comic The Dark Knight, right? Or have you seen the cartoon where Batman's all old?
No, you see, I'm a man and not a little boy, so no.
You can't tell me that and watch the movies you watch, because you have that little boy thing going
Pacific
on.
Rim was a great movie, okay?
How did you know?
There was nothing wrong with that movie.
Exactly where I was going. See? So hey, I was going to talk a little bit today about spiritual warfare and planning, and I'm going to. But I want to talk specifically about temptation. And part of the reason for that, I've got a couple things going on in my life, and we're going to get into the topic here in a minute. Number one, I've got a webinar this Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific on mobilizing your church, which is kind of one of my passions, talking about COGS, or what people would call micro church. I guess we never called it that when we did it, but getting your people mobilized, activated in their gifts. So you can check into that. Go to, if you don't sign up to Ministry Ninja newsletter, you need to go to ministryninja.com, and you can find all the details there. But anyways, check on my Facebook wall. You'll see it there. But the webinar is going to be this Friday at 3 p.m. And
you know, this is airing on Monday, right? So
yeah, but for the Facebook people, Facebook Live.
Okay, so
for all you guys, check.
So everyone listening to this on the podcast is too late.
It already happened, but go to Ministry Ninja anyways. You're going to catch the next one. The next one is going to be with Ralph Moore, and that's in February. So Ralph and I are pretty tight. We become friends. He is a mentor of mine. And then in March, I think it's Brian Sanders. So we've got a pretty cool lineup coming up with people that I respect and I think you should listen to, and you can check that out. But for my day job, what I do is I write episodes of, I would so like to say, the new Star Wars show. There's 9 of them coming out. No, I write episodes of Through the Word, which if you never check that app out, it's pretty epic. It is 8 to 9 minute chapter summaries of the Bible. They're frequently number 1 on YouVersion for downloads. They are a ministry that I deeply respect. The guy who founded it actually, up until recently, was heading up Refuge Long Beach and leading that team over there. So anyways, but right now I'm doing a series on temptation. And I just gotta, when it comes to church planning, you've got a target on your back. Like immediately, the second you put your toe to the line, Satan goes, okay, that's how you used to fight. You put your toe to the line, the guy could hit you, right? In boxing match, as soon as you put the toe to the line, boom, right? It was game on. So you only put your toe there if you're ready to get hit. And that's how it works with church planning. You put your toe to the line, the enemy's coming in for a blow. And so Pete, I'll let you do the transition, and then we will talk about temptation.
I got to remember what we say in the transition. It's not the podcast church planners deserve. It's the podcast they need.
Great Scott, it's time for this week's topic.
Let's get down to the nitty gritty.
There we go. All right. Well, hey, I don't know. Everybody think about your first temptation, right? My first temptation was when I was a kid. I used to sneak food because I was a fat kid, and Peyton Jones needed to feed. But the Bible actually talks a lot about temptation, and the reason why. And I always think that people kind of need an understanding of, why does it matter? Why does temptation matter? Why does overcoming temptation matter? Why don't I just fall into it? What's the big deal? I mean, hey, I can ask forgiveness later, right? But God is more concerned about keeping us safe than he is making us good. And I know that you might be like, well, wait a second, the Holy Spirit's making us holy. Yes, he is. But why does holiness matter? Holiness, if you boil it down, Jesus said, if you want to keep the commands of God, which are holy, perfectly, you love God with all your heart, you love your neighbor as yourself. So when we talk about it being safe, that's the core reason, is because sin hurts you, hurts God, and it hurts other people. Now, don't get all theological with me and say, technically, it doesn't hurt God because he's an immovable, unchangeable being. Yeah, whatever. But it hurts your relationship with him. So anything that hurts us, it pains God and it hurts God. And I mean, you would definitely say that Jesus is not he might be the rock of ages, but he's not an unfeeling rock. So Jesus cares about these things. It actually says he underwent temptation for us in every possible way so he could sympathize. Like, he feels, he cares. So, but most of us, especially Pete Mitchell, because he's got his reading glasses on, his reading, is drawn to temptation like a bug to a bug zapper, right? But we keep coming back to sin over and over and getting our wings and antennas fried. And think about it for a second, right? Our biggest trilogies ever. Pete, what would you say were the biggest trilogies?
There's only one.
Okay, give me it.
Star Wars.
Okay. Why do you think that trilogy connected with people? What do you think they related to in that?
Lightsabers.
Okay, that's not where I was going. That's not where I was going either. Laser guns.
but not as much as the
Exploding
lightsabers.
planets, maybe the hairstyles of Princess Leia,
The uniquenesses of the spaceships. Yeah.
I still think the trash compactor monster was the real reason people liked that film, but last season uncredited appearance.
I love how they got a shower in between when they get out of the trash compactor and before they get back on the ship. It was kind of amazing.
Yeah, but it's science fiction. It's like space. They had a thing they took out and they did the thing with the thing and then they got clean.
They got like that shampoo where it's like you don't need to wash it out. You can just put it on your hands, rub it in your hair, and you're good to go.
I just pictured her walking down the hallway. One of them pushed a button and this air vent all over in a ring went blew.
They should have had that on Spaceballs. If they had that on Spaceballs, that would have been perfect.
That would have been rad. But anyways, it's the reason that I think people connected to those films so much was that it was the temptation of the dark side. So if you look at it, right, Luke doesn't give in to his rage, but all he has to do is just give in to the temptation to his fear, his rage, his hatred, and then he wins, right? And every human, to be tempted is human. It's like our human experience. And the same with Lord of the Rings, the second biggest trilogy of all time. Lord of the Rings actually is about temptation at the core of it. Tolkien was a strong Catholic. He definitely meant for us to understand that sin, like the ring, the sin eventually takes over your soul and corrupts you over time, the more you give into it. And the temptation in the films the whole time for him is to keep it, to kind of like a Jedi, right? What made a Jedi was he resisted temptation. I mean, that's really what, in the original trilogy, and that's what made a Jedi.
The Siths were just false prophets.
Interesting. Thought about it. But they gave into temptation, right? The Sith were just like, hey, we're just giving into this. We're just going to go with it, right? So, I guess one of the things that's important to know is, everybody's tempted. To be tempted is to be human. And an important distinction is if you're tempted, that doesn't mean that you've sinned. I mean, Jesus was tempted. We just said he was tempted in every way. The temptation of Jesus is very different than my temptation. Like most of those things would have been temptation to me. So he was tempted in every way, but he also was tempted in more ways. So if I read the temptation of Christ in the wilderness, that temptation is very different than mine, right? Like I've never been tempted to go to the top of something and throw myself down and hope angels. I've never been offered all the kingdoms of the world. I've never been asked to turn some. His temptations were beyond what mine are, but then he had all of mine too. And so to be temptation is human. That's why Jesus was tempted. Even Adam and Eve. So it says, yet he was without sin. Adam and Eve were human. So they were tempted by Satan in the garden. Being tempted is a human condition. And so it's very important. And I think for you as planners and people leading people to Christ, to ensure them that they know that being tempted is not equivalent to being guilty of sin, right? Because one of the things that I think Satan does, he gets you to feel so rotten about being tempted. And funny enough, I had a dream last night, Pete, that I was working in something like Blockbuster. I told Andrew about this morning. I go, I had this really weird temptation dream. And it's probably because I'm working on this temptation study. But there was this girl in the dream and she was really pretty. And I guess we were working on like some Blockbuster thing. Those of you that know that the last Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon, I know exactly where that is.
I thought it was in Alaska.
No, it's in Bend, Oregon. And it actually, that's where David Thompson is from New Breed.
Yeah, but I thought, are you sure there's not one in Alaska? I heard the one in Alaska was the last.
No, I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty confident that the one in Bend, Oregon is, I mean, they just did a Netflix special about it. And I think it's called The Last Blockbuster or something like that. But it's in Bend. So, anyways, I'm jumpy today. I thought that was a person. Did you hear that? I thought another person appeared in my I don't know why I'm jumpy.
I thought that was Hellraiser trying to come in through the door.
I must feed. So, but anyways, so I don't remember what I was saying.
It had to do with temptation. I can tell you that.
It did, but I was going to say,
in the last Blockbuster.
Oh, so I have this dream, and I guess I'm working at like somebody. It looked like the Blockbuster in. So anyway, she's over at this other counter. I'm at my counter. I'm not flirting with her. I'm not doing anything. But she goes, she's checking me out. She's obviously into me, and she says, "How do you feel about cheating on your wife?" And it was like a proposal, and I go, "Not very comfortable about that." And then I go home, I tell my wife in the dream, and then I say, "I'm quitting, tomorrow." And I quit. So I woke up and I went, that's pretty cool. Normally in your dreams, you have no clue what you're doing. And so that was kind of cool though. But I think because I'm thinking about it all the time, but like, should I feel nasty that I had that dream? No, it's just hard to be inhuman. Temptation is not something you should feel guilty of. But if I'm Satan, I'm going to try to get you to feel dirty and evil and make you feel like just being tempted, like, oh man, I'm such a dirtbag. I might as well give in. I'm so gross. And that's his strategy. That's his tactic. There was a parable once about a flea market where the devil would set up all of his tools. And this guy's wandering down the aisles and he comes to the devil's booth and he looks at there's like all these nasty looking tools, like things that are big, made out of metal and have like gears on them and big hooks for sawing and gouging and basically ripping things apart. And he looks at this little one and it looks like a little metal toothpick, almost like a miniature crowbar. And he knows that at the highest price tag. So Satan looks over and he notices a man's puzzled look as if he's had to explain this a lot. And he goes, "Oh, you're wondering about that one, aren't you? That little beauty. It may not look like much, but it's my most valuable tool. That one is called discouragement." And he goes, "Because with that one, I can pry open any of my enemy's defenses. And then I can grab any one of these weapons I want and get in there and do the real work." And I think with temptation, that's what Satan actually does. He discourages us right off. Like it's like an alcoholic, right? They train the alcoholic to just resist that one drink. And Pete, from like not eating bad food. Like at one point you had to get past that first craving for whatever it was, Taco Bell or a donut or whatever. And then you get past that and you feel empowered and you're like, I can do this. Wait, I can do this.
But then at the same time, you always got to remember, like for me, it's like, okay, at any moment I could easily go back to that. And so it becomes a daily, no, it's easier, right? It's easier to keep resisting it, but you can always just trip up and go, to use your example, right? One little sin and then you're right back in.
Right. And yes, and that's the way that you stay clean, right? Is that one day at a time, right? That's where that came from. One day at a time. You count every single one step at a time. Those were all like recovery slogans. That's what you have to do. Yeah, you're right. You can go back. Like I'm a recovering sinaholic, I'm in recovery. I'm never cured. If I'm an alcoholic, I'm never cured. If I'm an addict, I'm never cured. I'm perpetually in recovery because of that same mentality. You can't ever think, oh, I'm past that. I can never do that. You have to live with that every day, and resist that temptation every day. And so really in many ways, AA and NA, what Dr. Bob, the two guys that founded that, they were ministers, by the way, in the holiness movement. They were lay ministers. And they wanted to reach people with the gospel, but they couldn't. They started in a church basement. They realized we're never going to reach people. So they took it out. They stripped down some of the language to higher power from Christ, on. And a lot of people that don't know much about them are like, oh, they totally sold out. They were leading people to Christ hand over fist. I mean, it was a very powerful movement. But what they had really done is they had studied temptation, and they had learned this is how you beat addiction. And it was a study in temptation. So, but one of the things I think one of the really important questions to ask at the very beginning is, why is Satan coming after you? If you're church planting, and we know the obvious reasons, right? Like I'm going to advance a kingdom. I'm a threat to him. I wasn't a threat to him when I didn't advance past the front lines. But an equally valid question would be, and my mind goes back to The Simpsons, where they're in the Sunday school class, and the teacher goes, does anyone have any questions? They start asking all those questions. Bart's asking, like, and she cries and has a breakdown and runs out screaming. But the Sunday school teacher, he goes, what if you took a human brain and put it in a robot body? And he starts like freaking out. I don't know, Bart. But one of the questions he asks is, why did God make Satan? She's like, but it's one of those kinds of questions. Like, why did God even allow temptation to enter the world at all? In other words, if God knew this was going to happen, why did he allow temptation? If I've said that temptation is a human trait, and we know even for us as ministers, why doesn't God just keep us from it? I mean, we're told to pray every day, lead us not into temptation. But why doesn't God answer that prayer fully? Like, obviously, what we're asking is, God, it'd be nice if you'd minimize it. Lead me not into temptation is kind of saying, lead me away or protect me. But why doesn't God remove all of it from us? And I think the reason for that, I can't, I'm a human being. I can't fully answer this, but I think one of the reasons for it is that we will not grow if we are not tempted. The word tempting in Hebrew means testing. And so the Bible says when you're tempted, it's the testing of your faith, right? In James, your faith gets tested. And so one of the things that Jordan Peterson, the psychiatrist or the psychologist, is kind of really popular. He believes that temptation helps humanity grow and overcome. So he would say something like, if you lock a child up in a castle, they never learn to fight a dragon. Here's what he writes. He says, even the most assiduous of parents cannot fully protect their children, even if they lock them in the basement safely away from drugs, alcohol, and internet porn. In that extreme case, the too cautious, too caring parent merely substitute him or herself for the other terrible problems of life. In other words, God would have been like a jailer to Adam and Eve. And Peter continues, it is far better to render beings in your care competent than to protect them. And even if it were possible to permanently banish everything threatening, everything dangerous, and therefore everything challenging and interesting, that would mean only that another danger would emerge, that of permanent human infantilism and absolute uselessness. How could the nature of man ever reach its potential without challenge and danger? Maybe God thought his new creation would be able to handle the serpent and considered its presence the lesser of two evils. Here's a question for parents. Do you want to make your children safe or strong? So, I mentioned earlier that God wants to make us safe rather than good, but not at the expense of making us weak. And that's the reality. Had there not been a devil, had there not been an enemy, had there not been Satan, then Adam and Eve would have never had an opportunity to truly trust God. And so here's kind of what I want to say is that, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into theology right now. And, there's all different ways that people interpret the Bible and use a framework for interpreting how God has dealt with humanity. There's three views that kind of stand out. One is dispensational theology, which, if you don't know what that means, it means that God changed the way that he dealt with man. He had different dispensations of how, like they would say something like, there was a dispensation of works. That God saved people by works at one time. Then it would go on. It would say this dispensation, that when he appeared to Noah, that was a new dispensation. He makes a new agreement and how he saves people. And I'm not a dispensationalist. I think it's pretty easy to disprove dispensational theology. John Gerstner, R.C. Sproul's teacher, did great work on that. Another guy I'll talk about in a minute did some amazing work on it. But then and a lot of people that are from Arminian persuasions believe in dispensational theology. The Reform camp says no. When it comes to Adam and Eve, and this is where this is going, by the way. I should have set this up better. But when God was dealing with Adam and Eve, he had a covenant, an agreement on works. If you obey, you will live. So all you have to do to stay in the garden is obey and live eternally. Just obey this one command. And then once they failed the covenant of works, then God set up the covenant of grace, because there was no other way to save humanity other than grace, because covenant of works was broken. It doesn't work for me. I was reformed. I studied all that. I believed it for years. And then I came across the works of a guy named D.P. Fuller, who was John Piper's mentor. Unfortunately, D.P. Fuller went liberal. I actually did my MA on him, my paper. But sorry about the noise here. It's a little distracting to me. But D.P. Fuller, I think, came up with the best interpretation of what happened with Adam and Eve, and it explains a lot. He said there has never been a covenant of works that would go against God's nature. It would give man something to boast of. And he goes, and one thing I know about the Bible is the Bible's completely against that kind of thinking. The only covenant God ever made with mankind is the same covenant he made before the fall and after the fall. And it was the covenant of faith. The Adam and Eve, what really happened at the temptation was a crisis of faith. They stopped trusting God. Satan comes in and says, did God really say? Did he really say this? Well, look, I'm telling you, you surely won't die, he says when she reiterates. It's and then it says, and then Eve looked, so she doubts what she hears, and then she trusts what she sees. Right? God told her, hey, just trust me on this. She doubts what she hears. She trusts what she sees instead. It says, when she saw that it was pleasing to the eye, good for food, and able to make one wise, she ate. So she trusted more her senses. She trusted her own judgment. She stopped trusting God. And so if you apply that to us, what temptation really is for each one of us, we go through an almost identical process every time that we are tempted. And that is the covenant of faith that God made with them, that he then made with Abraham and others. It wasn't different dispensations. It was a covenant of faith. We are saved by faith saved by grace through faith. It is faith that always saved. Faith would have preserved them. If they had trusted God, it was a covenant of faith, not a covenant of works. And sorry if this is going a little too deep and theological, but I actually think it helps us understand what temptation is. When I am tempted, and let's say like internet porn, Satan comes and goes, you need internet porn because you're a horny devil and you need this and you will feel better and be less horny and more productive at work and yada, yada. What we do is we trust, well, that's pleasing to the eye. It's good for food. It'd be good for me physically. And it makes me wise. Like I'll just, we have whatever spin we want to put on that. Somehow we make a deal with the temptation that, all right, this is going to be worth my while. And rather than going, God said, don't do this. There's a reason he said, don't do this. It's because he loves me and he cared for me. He knows, being God, he knows I'll be better. So recently, I read a book in the last couple of years called The Brain That Changes Itself. One of the most terrifying chapters in that is he has a whole chapter on what porn does to the brain. He's a neuroscientist. And he's a guy that pioneered neuroelasticity, how the brain changes and can reprogram itself. And you can literally physically see all this crap in the brain of someone who looks at porn because it actually abuses your brain, the system. It's like an addict's brain. And, some of it you just start coming to, even science is bearing out now what God said. There's a sense in which we don't hear these messages, we don't hear these things, and we come to believe what Satan says is actually more true and more right than what God says. And when we get into that position, we are no longer trusting God's word. We're no longer trusting what God has said. And now the reason that Satan's tempting me becomes very obvious. How can I possibly hold out hope to others who are in bondage and addiction if he has kept me in my, how would it look differently? How would my preaching be different? How would my ministry be different if I myself were someone who is living and walking in victory and set free and walking under the power of the Spirit? How would I see others set free? And this was always super important to me when I was doing frontline ministry, because I was like, I have to be free. I cannot be in bondage, because the power of God is real and it has to be in operation. And in the same way, now you begin to see why, from God's vantage point, the temptation is beneficial to me, because it's kind of like a muscle, right? Like, if the word testing of your faith, testing means, and notice that James says that temptation is a testing of your faith, right? You literally have, if I tested the strength of a cable or a cord or a chain, once that's broken, it's ruined, right? Like, it's done. But the testing of our faith, I think God designed that, and even engineered, maybe even that term was spirit inspired to refer to muscles and muscle tissue, because we know that our bodies, when I work out, I test my muscles, and it slightly tears them down. That's what temptation does. I think it tests us sometimes to our limit, but when we don't break, it grows back stronger. And even sometimes after you're tempted, you realize, oh my gosh, God was right. Like, let's say you fall into sin and your heart's not becoming hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. That's a very scary thing. But you're not becoming hardened to sin. You're beginning to, let's say you come to a point where you're like, oh my gosh, like David said in Psalm 51, where after 9 months of being just completely hardened and callous, the Nathan the prophet comes to him, and his heart's just broken open, and he pours out in Psalm 51 that you may be justified when you judge, and declared right when you speak. David comes into agreement with God over his sin after falling. Peter, after he denies Jesus, like, there's a brokenness, and so even that can have a benefit. But we don't want to be like, Satan wants to get you like John Bunyan, where John Bunyan, Christian goes to the house of the interpreter in Pilgrim's Progress, and the interpreter shows him these different rooms. And at one point he says, he sees this guy in a cage, and he says, what is this? And John Bunyan says, this is the guy who he kept going into sin over and over and over, and eventually he couldn't get away, and so he's stuck there now. He's actually, his own sins are holding him, and he can't get out. And I'm looking to see if I have that. I know we got to end here. I'm looking to see if I have it, and I don't have that. Somewhere I've got that quote. Here we go. Nope, it's not there. I don't have it. But I've got it in my notes, and I came across it and thought I put it in here. But before we end, because this is really heavy, let me end on a lighter note. I want to read you. Okay. There was a woman married to a miserly man. She had to fight for everything she got. One day, she told him she was going window shopping, and he said, look, but don't buy. A few hours later, she came home with a new dress. What is this? Her husband fumed. I thought I told you to look but not buy. Well, she explained, I saw this lovely dress and I thought I'd try it on. And when I did, the devil said, it sure looks good on you. Right then, you should have told him, get behind me, Satan, her husband exclaimed. I did, she answered. But when he got behind me, he said, sure looks good from the back as well. Anyways, but I mean, there's so much. This is like a 4-part study that I'm doing for Through the Word, and you can catch it on YouVersion eventually. But just, for each one of you, right? Like I was going to talk about spiritual warfare today, and I just thought, let's head into temptation. The two overlap quite a bit, but it's good to know a little bit about the anatomy of temptation. But today we really only hit on the introduction, why it's important, and why it even exists, and what it does, what's Satan trying to accomplish, and what's God trying to accomplish through it. And I hope today it's inspired you to think, because if it really is all about trust, I don't know about you, but that really helps me. It helps me to go, wait a second. My faith in God is being undermined. Every temptation, like Adam and Eve in the garden, I'm going through a miniature crisis of faith here. And so was Jesus, by the way. If you look at Satan's temptation of him in the wilderness, that's what he was trying to create in Jesus. Was a crisis. If you're the Son of God, hey, trying to create that crisis of faith. And it didn't work. And anyway, so I'm going to stop there.
Do I get to talk now? Do I get to say anything?
Suppose if you must.
Are you going to let me?
Yes. I know you want to speak. This is a big day.
No, it's funny. I was reading yesterday, 2 Peter, and it doesn't tie in directly with the temptation, but there were two different parts that I thought tied in really nicely with what you're talking about, especially as it relates to our church planners who listen to this. Most of 2 Peter is talking about false prophets and teachers, and basically pastors getting corrupted by sin to where they're totally off the reservation and not preaching the gospel at all. But this reminded me of something you were talking about with when sin controls us. So this is 2 Peter 2:19. They promised them freedom. So they're talking about the false prophets and teachers. That's the they promised them freedom, but they themselves are slaves of corruption. For whatever overcomes a person, to that he is enslaved. And I was like, yeah,
Ooh.
you're enslaved to that. But
yeah, that's finding its way in my study, people.
But when we look back here at 2 Peter 1, starting at verse 5, this was the one that really stuck out at me yesterday. For this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue, and with virtue with knowledge, and with knowledge with self-control, and self-control with steadfastness, and steadfastness with godliness with brotherly affection, with brotherly affection with love. For if these qualities are yours and are increasing, they keep you from being ineffective and unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. For whatever lacks these qualities is so nearsighted that he is blind, having forgotten that he was cleansed from his former sins. Therefore, brothers, be all the more diligent to confirm your calling and election. For if you practice these qualities, you will never fail.
Ooh.
I was like, ooh, yeah, that's it, right? Keeping focused, steadfastness, godliness, self-control.
Yeah, it's what the Puritans used to call growing in the means of grace.
You totally broke up there because of some.
Sorry, that's. It's what the Puritans used to call growing in the means of grace. I suppose some people still use those terms. They did at Lloyd Jones's church, but they would talk about growing in the means of grace. In other words, these are things that are given to you under God's grace. Yes, He forgave you of your sins, and you've been justified, but now you're being sanctified. But
whenever it's really loud in your background, your mic is cutting.
Well, I just need to turn that off and let everyone suffer through but yeah, that's powerful, man. Yeah, it's growing in the Spirit. There's another verse in Galatians where Paul says, "So I say, live by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the sin nature." So as you're filled with the Spirit, there's a contrast. You're not. And by the way, earlier when I said, "Lead me not into temptation," that's what he's actually saying. He's saying, "But deliver us from evil." He's saying, "When I'm tempted, deliver me." But when it says, "Lead us not into temptation," it's actually saying, "Change my desires, God." That's what you're praying for, is change my desires to be desires. Because you're always going to have some of the other desires. They're always going to be there until we get the other side of heaven. But what you're praying is, God, change them. And kind of with we were talking about the diet, you just nailed your diet. at a certain point, some of those cravings went away. Like you said, I could fall back at any time, but you actually began to change in your appetites.
Yep.
You stopped craving junk. Junk started almost being reprehensible to you. And it works that way in the spirit as well, where you start to just go, oh, dude, sin. You start coming into agreement with God about sin, and you start getting repulsed by it. Like those of you that, and I hate to say this, but those of you looking at pornography, if you stopped doing that and God set you free from it, the stuff you're looking at now would horrify you if you came back to it after being set free and walking in the spirit over a prolonged period of time. You couldn't even look at it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's those appetites that they will change, and you will find yourself, and you can't grow. You won't grow. The reverse is true. You won't have an appetite after godliness and after the spirit. That's why the Paul says the spirit desires what is contrary to the flesh, contrary with the spirit. So you cannot build them both. It's like a choice. And so when you look at it, you're like, man, I want to grow. So I think that the power of God, those kinds of things, that was something that always, back when we were at Refuge Long Beach, just the power of the Holy Spirit was a necessary ingredient. I used to, Charlie and I would talk, and he'd be like, man, I don't want to sin, because just I'm so overwhelmed by God's grace. And I'm just so grateful. And I'm like, yeah. And at that time, like I had my grace revolution, but he was going through it. And I remember saying to him, that's cool and that's beautiful. I don't want to fall into sin because I don't want to lose the anointing of the Holy Spirit. That like, none of this happens without the anointing of the Spirit, the empowering of the whole, like the life change we were seeing, Pete, some of the miraculous conversions, some of the supernatural stuff that would pop off, like that stuff we needed God. You know what I mean? We just needed him. And, so, but, oh man, temptation for sure that's going to come. And, it's funny. I mentioned the dream. That's one thing that I'll notice we start off saying it's an aspect of spiritual warfare. When I am walking super tight and holy, Satan comes to me in my dreams. That's the thing. That's where I feel like those are the times. And that's, again, to try to discourage me for even having those dreams, So it was nice to have an encouraging one last night. But, your dreams are like, that's your subconscious, man. It's like the back door. And Satan will harness those. So I'm not saying all your bad dreams are Satan. I'm not saying all your tempting dreams are Satan. James says your own sinful desires drag away and entice you. Each one is tempted by his own. I got enough. God taught me to base on my own. I don't need Satan to light any fuses or matches there. I got my own problems. There's enough of it in me. But while I'm resisting all the temptation, Pete, the best part of our show, come on, it's the best part of our show every week.
I totally forgot about that until you started down that path.
When you go, can I speak now? Because I was reading and I was like, oh, if he segues into our ad right then.
That's funny.
Right.
Well, Peyton, to help me spend more time fighting off temptation, that means I definitely have to get out of the busy work of running a church, because that'll send me right into temptation.
Pete, fighting this temptation is a full-time job. And so therefore, what you need to do is you need to go to simplifiedchurch.com. Simplifiedchurch.com. Go ahead and send them a note and tell them that Pete and Peyton sent you. And be sure to add a note that I am too busy temptation to deal with all my church finances. Can you help me?
I love it.
Simplifiedchurch.com. All right. Well, guys, hey, thanks for joining us today. This has been fun. Pete and I got off to a late start. So if you're on the Facebook going, why is this going over? But I'm kind of proud of us today because we actually didn't spend tons of time on Smack Talk.
Only 30 minutes this time.
Well, that's an improvement. That's 10 minutes less than where we've been. We've been running over. So anyways, guys, thanks for joining us today on the Church Planter Podcast. This has been Peyton Jones and Pete Mitchell reminding you, if you want to...
No one heard anything you just said. If we want to...
I didn't say anything.
Oh.
If you want to read in the background, If you want to reach the ones no one's reaching, you need to go where nobody's going and do what nobody's doing. That's a wrap, everybody.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us for another weekly episode of the Church Planter Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones. We'd love to hear your comments on this episode of the Church Planter Podcast. Visit us online and let us know what you thought at churchplanterpodcast.com. If you subscribe to us via iTunes and have enjoyed the podcast, leave us a positive review. The more positive reviews we receive in iTunes, the more iTunes will promote us to other church planners who would benefit from this show. This podcast is brought to you by the Church Planter Magazine, which is available in the iTunes newsstand or online via churchplantermagazine.com.